Welcome to the Capital Coffee Connection podcast. I am Liz Hirsch-Naftali, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with the mayor of Fort Worth, Texas, Mattie Parker. So welcome, Mattie. Thank you so much for joining me. One of the things that I love about this podcast is that we really get a chance to talk about the heart and the humanity of our elected leaders. We're not going to go into politics and policy, and we're just really getting to know who our leaders are. And one of the things about Mayor Parker that I thought was just really interesting is that she is a millennial. She's probably the youngest leader of a major city in America. And incredibly, in her last election, she got 70% of the vote, which is really outstanding. And she is a young leader, Republican woman who basically, from everything that I have learned, and we're going to learn more, is really doing this because she understands that this is about everybody working together, people listening, and people coming together to make change. So I hope that we will be able to share throughout this a lot about Mayor Parker, but I really am excited because I think that what she represents is where we need to be as a country, all the way down to our cities. So thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Liz, for the opportunity. I appreciate that.
So the first thing I would love to ask you is, one of the things that I learned about you is that you are really interested in young people. You're working to make the city a better place for young people. And I would love to understand what it is that is your connection to being a mayor and what it is you see in the youth of your city.
Well, I think probably at a large viewpoint for me, my husband and I are at that point in life, we're still raising our kids. Our youngest will turn 8 at the end of this month. And so our life really revolves around young people. And because of that, it really informs both who I am as a mother, but also who I am as a policy leader for our city. I also think there's a significant business case the United States has really missed here. The way we invest in young people, starting really prenatally or at birth through their first few years of life, there's a huge return on investment in the way we take care of our most vulnerable, our children in our communities. And I think because of that, it's really informed the way I want policy to move forward for the city of Fort Worth. We're also a young city. Our average age here is about 33. We are a best place for families, and we really cherish the fact that people move here for a quality of life, not only to build their business, but also to raise their families.
Yeah.
And then we're also a part of Texas. 1 out of every 10 children in the United States now are Texans and growing rapidly. And so if you ask the question as a policy leader, what do you want your city to be in 5, 10, 20, 50 years? You have to be investing in the youth of today. And I think that for far too long, unfortunately, these issues, especially around early childhood education or the built environment for children, because it's usually adults and arguably usually older adults making those decisions, they're so far removed from that stage of their life that it's not their first priority. Mm-hmm. But I have enjoyed forcing those conversations as a policy leader, both here in my own city, but across the state, to help make a difference there. And then lastly, I think I mentioned this briefly, but I do strongly feel like the way communities take care of those that can't take care of themselves, those that don't have the same agency, is really a measure of who you are as a community.
Right.
And if we pay more attention to those that actually can't vote for us, that are going to be here 10, 20 years and be in the seats we're in today, Fort Worth will be stronger for it.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And I think you're absolutely correct. And one of the things I've learned about you is that you really take into consideration this idea of doesn't matter what political party, religion, where you're from, but that you need to work together. And as a mayor, your job is really about the people. So how is it to work with Democrats, Republicans, and different people? And one of the things I also know about you is that you really value listening. So can you talk a little bit about those things? Because I think that gets lost a lot in modern politics.
Well, I think honestly, and you could speak to this too, I think most Americans are really exhausted from the partisanship and ideology battles that are happening, especially right now as we embark into this presidential election in 2024. But for whatever reason, most of us that are normal-headed, that don't care about taking to our corners, have just sort of turned away and tried to just live our lives and ignore the noise. But I think there's a danger in that, the cynicism that creates in government. And we're an amazing democracy, this experiment that continues. And those of us that are willing to work together, build consensus, find compromise, enjoy robust debate and conversations with people that are not like us.
Yeah.
There's so much value in that. Furthermore, for whatever reason, this new movement I've seen where if you don't take to your corner, if you don't take a hardline approach, that you're weak in some way. And I fundamentally reject that. That's actually not how some of the most successful private sector businesses have been run. It's not how our faith communities are run. So why have we allowed government to get to that place? Mm-hmm. And then lastly, cities don't function in partisan ideology. You actually would get zero done.
Yeah.
And I would tell you, and you can, there are great examples across the country, when cities become too partisan, when they focus too much on being, the most liberal, the most progressive, the most conservative, they lose sight of the basics. And they're just a benefit as a city leader to noticing that. And maybe because of my background being in policy for most of my career, I've seen those things really falter and cause harm to a city.
Yeah.
No, so it motivates me.
Yeah.
I wish more of us would speak up against it. And I think that there are a majority of us that are tired of it. We just need more loud voices around that, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I think it makes a lot of sense. And I think you're right. And while we're talking about being the mayor, what makes Fort Worth special? What are the special parts about your city? I see you smiling, and each city has a different flavor and different energy, but I would love to hear from you what it is about Fort Worth that is special.
So it's interesting. Our Visit Fort Worth, or Visitors Bureau, produced a commercial about a year and a half ago that we utilized the voice of Jimmy Stewart, mm-hmm. who had a deep connection here to Fort Worth. And our slogan became, we're an unexpected city, the unexpected city. I think that's absolutely true. People that visit here that never heard about our community are incredibly marveled by what it has to offer. We are a large city with all that comes with it. At the same time, it feels like a small town. People truly take care of one another here. There's a kindness and empathy for people, a very diverse city. Or you mentioned our age is young. And it feels like there's something of an air of opportunity here that I think is unique for large cities. The other thing I would point out is we're a city where no matter what you're interested in, you can find your niche, whether it's in our cultural district, our museums, the Fort Worth stockyards, our downtown business community, emerging opportunities in South and East Fort Worth. All that's happening here at the same time. And Fort Worth's also had to be scrappy because we were a smaller community. We hovered around 500,000 people for over 2 decades. And then our explosive growth has now gotten us to almost 1 million. So we're now in the category with, Dallas and Austin and Charlotte and all these other big places across the country. And we're starting to get noticed for the right reasons. And we're the fastest growing city for a reason, Liz. If you come here, people are moving here for a reason. And you might get here and say, why is it that more people want to live here? And it's just simply quality of life. I talk about that a lot. Why would anybody move across the country to a place like Fort Worth? And they feel something here, and that air of opportunity I mentioned that's offered to them and their families, or if they're building a business here as well.
So you talked about Fort Worth, how it's grown, and you come from a small town, very small area, 80 miles southwest of Fort Worth, and it's called Hico?
Hico.
Hico.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you come from Hico, and you really grew up on a farm. And could you talk a little bit about what that was like? Because, some people see you sitting there and you're, the mayor and you're in a suit, but I think it's really interesting from where our leaders come.
Yeah, it definitely informs me. I grew up, like you said, in Hico. My family's ranch is about 15 minutes outside of Hico. So I was 2 miles down a dirt road. I said this a lot, but I had a party line until I was 14, which for someone my age was actually quite unique. We were pretty advanced in technology by then, just not on this dirt road. And for those listening that don't know what a party line is, that means we have to share a phone line with your neighbors. So I had a neighbor to each side of me, Fred and Bartine, and I'd have to get them off the phone in order to make a phone call. So I joke with my kids a lot. You talk about technology now. I got at 16, my gift was an extra long phone cord that I could drag the phone into my room, an old rotary phone. But I had a great upbringing, and I'm really proud of being from a small town. My graduating class was 42 students. I got a great education. I was able to go to UT Austin for undergraduate school. But being a part of a small community really does inform the way I like to lead today. My grandmother used to always tell me, if you don't want it on a billboard, don't say it, because in a small town, it'll get repeated 2 times over. You couldn't get home from school if you'd done something stupid without your family knowing about it.
Even before you got home?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that especially today with how prolific social media is, and people will say and do anything online, it does cause me to pause because I just grew up in an environment where there was not a lot of anonymity,
Yeah.
even in the 80s and 90s. And it helps that tremendously. Small town Texas is special. And I think it really, I grew up in a bubble in some ways, but at the same time was really fortunate to get to kind of spread my wings when I went off to college. Fort Worth still, like I said, is a large city, but it also has a lot of small town roots to it that have a connection to the way I was raised.
Your parents were interesting. From what I understand, they were a bit like hippies.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
What does that mean? And what
Well,
is that like?
yeah, my parents were, in college in the 60s and 70s, both college, master degree. My dad has a law degree, educated, but very much free spirits. My parents divorced when I was in high school. I spent a lot of time going to folk festivals and concerts. So I guess in some ways, my upbringing, picture this small town kid that was pretty sheltered, but
Right.
being raised by two individuals who saw the world as a much bigger place. And I definitely had an unorthodox childhood in that way as well. Very interesting people. My mom was a ballerina until she had me at 33. She had to quit really to have children.
Yeah.
My brother later at 37. So yeah, definitely interesting people. I spent a lot of time listening to music, sorting my dad's record albums, and going to concerts, which I think today makes me maybe a little more interesting. My depth of knowledge of classic rock is probably not that of an average millennial. I'll say that.
And you had grandmothers that were involved in part of your raising, and they
Yeah, I
were
had
very
really strong
influential.
both paternal and maternal grandmother. My maternal grandparents lived there in Hico, and I was with them almost every day. So they were a big part of my upbringing. And my maternal grandmother lived in Austin, and she had a remarkable background. She's probably where I got my political interest, being honest. Her husband, my grandfather, who passed away when I was 4, served as a state house member for Texas and then worked for LBJ as an assistant attorney general.
Wow.
Hearing her story, she was always incredibly motivated about what's happening, especially around women in politics. When Ann Richards was governor, I remember my grandmother being so proud to get to see a female governor in the state of Texas was a sense of pride for her. I remember fondly her crying when Obama took the nomination for the Democrats. And it wasn't because she didn't like Senator Obama, it's because she really wanted to see a female president
Right.
before she died. And she was ailing at the time. And she looked at me and said, I'm never going to see it, but, at least I got to see her go this far, which is a really sweet story. She was on Navy Wave, which was fascinating in World War II. She trained pilots on the technology utilized in different aircraft. That's how she met my grandfather. She was an incredible force for teaching me at a very young age what involvement looked like. You would almost thought she was a suffragette, even though she was too young for that movement,
Mm-hmm.
because she believed so strongly in a woman's place to have their voice heard. And that's ironic, Liz, because she was a homemaker and she really stood behind my grandfather for all those years. But she had this fire about her that I oftentimes think to myself how proud she would have been that her only granddaughter became a mayor, because she believed so much in civic responsibility in our democracy and especially women's voice in that.
Yeah, it's actually a beautiful story because, like, I look at you and I think these young girls can look and see, oh, I can be a mayor, and young boys too, which is important. But I think and when I grew up, we didn't know that women could be a vice president or a president, and we're getting there. And so I think that that's an important message, and that your grandmother, whether she was a homemaker or she was working, whatever she was doing, but she understood that this was something that we had to strive for, that there
Yeah,
should be
most
women
definitely.
leaders. Yeah.
Yes, very well said.
And in school, I'm just wondering, I would like to ask different leaders, was there a teacher who influenced you or somebody that, motivated you, besides calling your parents to tell you what you did wrong before you got
Yeah.
home?
No, I was a pretty boring good kid. I was actually just discussing this with my first cousin this weekend. She and I are like sisters, and we went through every grade level we had together with which teachers we had. And what an amazing landscape of education I received, even in a really small town. But I had a few really remarkable teachers in particular. One of them, his name is Gary Brister, who I still stay in really close contact with now. And he was mainly my high school UIL coach. So we would go to competitions in prose or acting, et cetera. Did a lot of English classes with him. And you could just tell he invested in me. He saw something special and spent a lot of time making sure that I was challenged and had that next level of support as needed.
Yeah.
I told a funny story to students recently that when I got into UT and knew where I was going to live at Jester Dormitory, he let me tape off with masking tape in his classroom how big my dorm was going to be. And I would lay in it like, okay, I think I understand now what our living situation is going to be.
Yeah.
And I got to pay it forward recently. His son applied for a really remarkable scholarship here in Texas, which he ended up receiving a full ride scholarship. And he needed, letters of recommendation, also some coaching about what it looked like to interview. And I got to be with Regan and kind of walk him through that. It was a kind of a special opportunity for me to in my small way, pay it forward to his family,
Yeah.
who had been so special to me. Just as a good reminder, I'm sure you've talked to leaders about this. There are certain teachers, and that's just one example, that really stick in your memory.
Yeah.
And I honestly can't count teachers that don't have that impact on me.
Yeah.
And knew that despite the fact we were in a small environment, they still had a responsibility to give an excellent education to the students who were there and make sure they could excel in whatever they chose to do.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So about the work that you do and paying it forward, you have 3 children?
Yes, we do.
How do you balance that with 3 children, with being the mayor, with all the responsibilities? And I'm assuming you have a husband that is helpful.
Yes, yeah. We always tell, especially young women, pick a partner that supports you no matter what, because it matters immensely in what path you take. I mean,
Yeah.
Dave and I have been married over 15 years now, and I'm sure when we got married, we never expected that at one point we'd embark on elected office like we have. And just to get through a campaign cycle alone takes a lot of partnership. And
Yeah.
I'm very thankful that David's been supportive in that. As far as balance goes, we all get this question. And
Yeah.
I think some weeks are just easier than others. Some weeks you feel like you're going to collapse, and others feel like you have it handled. It just depends on what's happening around you. I try to keep perspective as best I can and remember that when you're juggling the proverbial balls of your life and everything's up in the air, there are certain things you just can't drop.
Right.
And my family and my children are certainly those priorities. I don't miss kids' events if at all possible, unless it's just absolutely necessary. And we divide and conquer as best as possible. But I also try, and this is, to be honest with you, mom guilt is real. And sometimes you can't overcome that. And it is interesting to me, even for men in elected office that have children, they're often not asked that question. And they would be able to answer that. Most of the men that I work with that are contemporaries are balancing a lot of the same things that I'm balancing as a parent in office. I think the difference is for women, there's such an emotional connection to our role as mothers that maybe is worn more outwardly than for men. And we're known for that piece of it. So society naturally just sort of puts that on them. How are you handling this? Like, how do you manage a household?
Yeah.
But I have a lot of successful girlfriends. They may not be on the front page of the paper with their job, but they're balancing the same types of things I am, work travel, and when kids events are, and what the calendar looks like, and a babysitter that's sick, and all the things that happen are real life for us. But I think it's good perspective, especially as a policymaker today, because it grounds me every single day in making sure we're making decisions that are balanced and steeped in reality and not far removed from what the day-to-day Fort Worthian or American really lives with.
Yeah. Recently, and I appreciate that, because mom guilt is real, not getting it all done, and just understanding sometimes you're just not going to finish everything. I interviewed and spoke with Colin Allred recently. And one of the things he said, which I thought was so interesting, was he said, when I go to the nursery school, people are like, oh, the father was there, he was there. And when my wife goes, it's just expected. So he was even acknowledging that when she's there, nobody says, oh, I'm so glad, she's there. So it's just an interesting perspective, and to hear from a male leader understanding that his wife is not getting the celebration of showing up, and he is, when she's the one doing most of the work.
Yeah, absolutely. It's enlightened on his part to even recognize that in the first place, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I thought that was a good
And
point.
I think sometimes it gets confused when women bring this up. It's like, okay, you're just making a feminist comment, you're wanting more credit. That actually is not it at all. I just recognize that most families today split those responsibilities.
Yes.
It's a way of life today that families are having to make sure they're partnered in the right way. And to cast that only onto women, and that guilt that already comes with that, is incredibly unfair. And recognizing that, like everything, we all have seasons in life, and we all have times when we're more focused on family or more focused on work, and it all creates a balance somehow. But for some reason, for women are just really hard on each other about what that looks like.
Yes. Yes. Having said that, what is the best advice you've ever received, or the worst advice?
Best advice is probably to always attempt to take care of yourself first. put the oxygen mask on before you try to help other people around you. And that is difficult as women, but I'm at my best self if I am physically taking care of myself, active, and making sure I have a break and reading when I want to read and getting away and disconnecting. And to your point, you can't get it all done. You can't be at all the things, and recognizing when you need to unplug has been really important. The other piece of advice work-wise is you have 2 ears for a reason. You have to listen. But when you do speak, especially for women in leadership, and I feel this acutely in this role that I'm in, I only get one chance. I get one first impression. And it is different for me as a young woman in this office. And I'm sure when I was elected, I know there were a lot of people that made assumptions about my age at 37. Was I prepared? Was I qualified? And it was remarkable as when I would open my mouth, when I would speak in an event or be in a forum or handle something in the dais, I would almost get this like pat on the head, man, like, you're incredibly intelligent. You can handle yourself. I was like, God, you would never say that to, a contemporary that was, maybe an older age, or, a man was specifically, but just using that to challenge myself, to always be better and use it to my advantage, because I'd like being underestimated in some way.
Exactly. And then you show up and, then they're like, wow.
Right.
But,
yeah.
Okay. So now I'm going to ask you some rapid questions. They're basically just to get to know you. They're easy. I think they're softballs. They're pretty easy. Hopefully they're fun. What is your favorite sound?
The ocean.
What is your favorite color?
Blue.
What is your favorite smell?
Oh, my babies. I won't ever smell that again. But why do newborn babies smell so good?
I know. And who is your biggest cheerleader?
With my mom.
If you were on a desert island and you could have one meal delivered, what would that be?
Chicken fried steak.
Ah, that's pretty good. Would it come with other things or just chicken fried steak?
Mashed potatoes, gravy, or okra.
Sounds
That's a Southern specialty,
Yeah. You exercise?
I'm a runner, yes.
Okay, good.
Yoga.
And when you run, do you listen to music? Do you have a playlist? Do you have music that...
It depends. Usually not. I run with a group of women early in the morning, and we don't have any music playing. We just chit chat with each other.
Oh, nice.
But when I work out by myself, yes, absolutely, I do have a playlist. What
is your highlights on your playlist?
Oh, I think right now it's probably between, you'll laugh at this, between Foo Fighters and Taylor Swift, probably have equal playing like that type of music. So I'm a little bit of a contradiction.
Okay, that's a good one. Household chores. What's your favorite household chore?
To sweep.
Clean the floors.
Yeah.
Okay. And if you were going to pick a superpower, what would Mayor Parker's superpower be?
Time travel.
Okay. Where would you go? Or which direction would you go?
I think sometimes I really reflect on the ability to go back and watch yourself during a certain period of your life, that maybe it makes you feel better or more proud of something you've done today. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And if you and your husband could go anywhere in the world on a trip, where would you all go?
I think we would probably be in Hawaii.
Sounds good. Okay, so my last question, which I have asked everybody the same exact question, and I love the answers because they're very different, and yet they're really beautiful. So my question is about joy. What is joy to you? What brings you joy? And if you have joy, how can you share it to make other people's lives better or more fulfilled? And obviously, being a leader, you have things that are joyful as a leader, but joyful as a mother, joyful as a woman.
I think for me, when I think about times when I'm joyful, it's all about connection, right? Is it with your family or your friends? Are you connected in a way that feels really intimate? Is there laughter? Are there tears? Are there things that are incredibly authentic and meaningful? And I think that also translates into work, right? If you're joyful in work, it's because you've connected to something in a way that's incredibly meaningful, and you felt like you've made a difference because of that connection. It makes you joyful in that space. I think the other thing I would say about joy is recognizing there's probably a spectrum, and it depends on what the situation is. And sometimes in your personal life, your joy feels almost like a high, whereas in your professional life, it makes you feel grounded in the reason why you're doing something. So, and I've noticed that about myself. When I feel disconnected, when I feel like I'm just going through the motions, you take the joy out of whatever you're doing. And I think that's especially true in public service. You can be pretty jaded sometimes and just go through the motions and forget what your why is in the first place. And it should be, you should be able to find joy in whatever you're doing, especially in work, because you spend so much time doing it. And sometimes pausing to reflect on that is very important, or you should be doing something else altogether if you're not finding joy in it.
Yeah. No, I think that's it's very true. And the part about sometimes we just go through the motions and we don't stop to say what we appreciate or to look around and, look around at who's around us and what we're doing. And one
Yeah.
of the things that I want to say thank you, because you really shared a lot that I believe people want to hear. We talked about people being entrenched. We talk about people not speaking. And what this purpose of this podcast is that people can, whether they are from anywhere in the United States, I mean, it's a podcast, anywhere in the world, but to like really understand what you are doing as a leader, as a woman, and that this is really about trying to make other people's lives better. And if we don't come together and talk, and you don't come together and work with the different people in your community, those things don't happen and we go crazy. One of the most important things about human beings is the connectivity. And so I really appreciate this time, and I really appreciate hearing about your grandmothers and where you come from and the party line. And so I just want to say thank you, and keep being a powerful leader and showing everybody who may have a low expectation, because you're a young woman, that you are pretty special and you are going to really show people what you can do to make this world a better place for so many
Well, I
people.
appreciate that, Liz. Thank you. What a meaningful way to spend time on a podcast. There's plenty of political fodder out there. There's other places people can get that. But I think to humanize the people that are in elected office is very important. And especially for women, I mean, arguably more women are made caricatures, whether they're Democrats or Republicans right now, and what talking head network that they're on. And
Yeah.
that makes me sad, because even if they're willing to be that person, deep inside there somewhere is a mom, is a wife, is someone that's trying to go through their day. And we're not characters on some show, right? We're trying to lead meaningful roles, meaningful lives in those roles. So thank you for doing this.
Well, thank you. And I look forward to coming to Fort Worth and meeting you.
I know you have to come visit us. We love that, Liz.
I will. Thank you so much. Hi, it's Liz. Please join me every Tuesday for coffee to talk about heart and humanity with our elected leaders. Remember to hit subscribe to get an alert when a new episode is live and for exclusive content. Ciao.